want to welcome everyone to our workshop today, Participatory Evaluation. Today's event is sponsored by American University's Measurement and Evaluation Program. At American University, we are committed to pursuing inclusive excellence. One of our practices, shared from our Indigenous and Native communities, is to offer a land acknowledgement at the beginning of our meeting and events. The goal is to build our mindfulness of the historical processes in which we still participate. American University is founded on the unceded land of the Nacotchtank, Anacostan, and Piscataway peoples. I ask you to join me in acknowledging these communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. American University also acknowledges that it was founded upon exclusions and erasures of many Indigenous peoples, including those on whose land this institution is located. With this acknowledgement, we commit to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. Those of you who attend our events know that we always provide a land acknowledgement. I would encourage you today to take this a step further and do some research on the land where you are sitting. If you are not aware of the history of the land, I will put some links in the chat that you can use to do a little bit of research. As we get started today, I will introduce you to our student team overseeing today's workshop. Our moderators are going to be Miguel and Gabby, and that's the end of my duties today. I'm going to pass it off to Miguel. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Before we get started today, I would like to hear where you are joining us from. If you would like perhaps to write in the chat box where you're joining from, and I will read it out loud. Excellent. We have Caroline Costa from Brazil, and we have someone from Western Pennsylvania, Durham, North Carolina, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and University of Mississippi, Boston, Massachusetts, Galveston, Texas. So a wide variety of locales. Do we have anyone from the Facebook feed?
Facebook's still pretty quiet, but I'll keep you posted.
That's great. We have people. Oh, and Charlottesville, Virginia. We have people from all over the world. Let's see. It's really great to see that. Our panel today has two alumni speakers. Jess Littman, she is a master's alum, and Odile Drice who's a certificate alum. I will let them introduce themselves as they speak. And if you have any questions, please put them in the question and answer section or in the chat, and we'll have some time for questions at the end of each presentation today. Take it away, Jess.
Thanks, Miguel. I'm going to share my screen here. Miguel, is that all set?
Looks great.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Jess Littman. As Miguel mentioned, I am a graduate of the master's program in measurement and evaluation at AU. I've been an evaluator for many years, working mainly in the education and healthcare spaces in East Africa. And today I am here to talk about trying to make an evaluation participatory when you're maybe not in the best of circumstances to do that. So this is a presentation for evaluators who already have some interest in using participatory methods, but if you're not sure how to get started or you're facing some obstacles in doing that, I'm hoping that this presentation today will help you out. So first of all, I want to go over what a participatory evaluation is. So participatory evaluation is when the people who are normally positioned as the subjects of the research participate in designing and actually doing the evaluation. And when we are trying to see whether the evaluation we have is participatory, there's a number of questions you can ask to try to determine that. So who's determining what the evaluation is, the questions and methods? Is it the community members who are invested, the folks who are the subjects of the research, or is it evaluators from outside of the community? Who designs the evaluation instruments, the subjects of the research or the outside evaluators? Who collects the data? Who analyzes it? Who decides how to interpret that analysis? Who gets to hear about the results and know what was learned? Who has power to act upon the results? Who gets paid to do all of this? And who gets the credit for doing it? So the answers to these questions can vary. There are not a lot of evaluations being done where you could take this list of questions and answer every one of them saying the subjects of the research do this work. But it is possible to have an evaluation where the research subjects or the invested community members are starting to participate, and you can say that they're the ones who are collecting the data, or they're the ones interpreting the analysis, or they can become the answer to one or more of these questions. So the goal of the webinar today is not to make you feel bad if you can't put your entire evaluation that you're working on in the hands of the research subjects. Instead, I want to discuss some ways that you can start to engage participants more actively in one or more of these areas, so the answers to these questions start to change over time and evaluation starts to become more participatory. So if you're here today, I'm guessing that you already have an interest in participatory evaluation. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over why we want evaluation to be participatory, but I'm just going to go over some of the reasons that are most compelling to me in my work as an evaluator to try to include more participatory methods. And the first is that I think that it's more ethical to engage participants in the evaluation. I heard somebody trying to talk there. Is that a moderator? Or should I keep going? Okay, I'm going to keep going. Hope you all can hear me well. So participatory evaluations center the people who are being evaluated rather than centering the evaluator. So at their best, they elevate the subject of the evaluation to evaluator status. In my work personally, I do a lot of evaluations with very vulnerable people. And so participatory methods are really important in trying to create a better balance of power between the people being evaluated and the people doing the evaluating. But participant evaluators also generate better data than evaluators who come from outside those communities and don't have lived experience of the subject of their research. Engaging evaluation participants in the design and the conduct of the evaluation leads to evaluation questions that are more relevant, data collection tools that are more valid, and analysis that's oriented in the context of the evaluation. So it's really important to keep in mind that we don't do participatory methods just to be nice to the participants. We don't do participatory methods just for the sake of inclusivity. Inclusivity is really important. I personally think it's a good enough reason to do many things, but it's not the only reason to do participatory evaluation. Participatory evaluation is better than evaluation that's not participatory because it generates better, more relevant data. And participants who engage in evaluation are more likely to then use the findings of the evaluation to create change in their own communities. So those of us who have been doing evaluation for longer, we've all had the experience of working really hard on an evaluation, and the report doesn't get to the right people, or it doesn't get listened to by the right people. When you engage the subjects of the research and participating as evaluators, they're the ones who can then take the results of evaluation and say, okay, this is what needs to change for this community in order to get better results in the future. So there are many advantages to participatory evaluation, the ones I just went over and many others. So if participatory evaluation is so great, then why are we not already doing this all of the time. Unfortunately, there are also drawbacks, and there's also a lot of misconceptions about what participatory evaluations are, what participatory methods are, and how they can be utilized. A lot of evaluations come out of big institutions and complex partnerships. And in those sort of institutions and partnerships, it's often really hard to encourage them to make change or to do something experimental or new or more inclusive. So if you have worked in such an institution and have tried to use participatory methods, I'm going to go over some of the things that you've probably heard as pushback and some of the ways that folks will try to tell you that it's not possible to do participatory methods. And then I'll go into how we can respond to these perceived drawbacks to participatory methods. So people who are not open to participatory methods will often say, we can't do that, that's too expensive. Engaging participant evaluators might mean more travel to more remote locations. It might mean providing more training. It might, in fact, it should mean providing stipends to more researchers. And that does add costs to evaluations. And that's something that could be a concern for an institution looking at participatory methods. Another perceived drawback of participatory methods could be that you need someone who's an expert in order to use participatory methods. So a lot of participatory evaluation methods are newer or more experimental than some much longer established evaluation methods. So some folks may be concerned that they just don't know how to do participatory methods well. And especially if you're in an institution that's especially concerned about research rigor, then they might either not think the methods are rigorous enough or think that they need someone who's an expert in order to use the methods rigorously. And without having such a person on staff, they might just say, this isn't us, we can't do this. Something else that I have heard a lot, maybe the most often, is that you can't do participatory methods in a quantitative evaluation. Quantitative evaluations usually require a high level of technical skill. So unless you're doing research on like a professional association of economists, you might not get folks who are your research subjects who would be able to just jump into working on the evaluation side of a quantitative evaluation. And so this is something folks will often say, like, this is just too complex, too high level. We need too much education in the folks who are going to work on this evaluation. And finally, something else that I hear a lot is folks putting forward their dissemination, their evaluation dissemination events or practices as the only participatory method that they need. So I think that disseminating results with the community that's affected, with the research subjects, is of the utmost importance and should hopefully be the subject of other webinars and something that we're working on a lot. But disseminating the evaluation results to the evaluation subjects might mean that they are participating. It might mean that they're just hearing the results. And even at its best, when they are participating and actually engaging in the dissemination of results and doing something with the results, at best that happens at the end of the evaluation, and we didn't have their engagement from the beginning, which is a better and more inclusive and more effective way to have participatory engagement. So these are all obstacles that I've faced as an evaluator, and I hope that others can, well, I don't hope you can relate. I hope it's been very easy for you, but I think probably others can relate to these. But despite these obstacles, there is a lot you can do as an evaluator to promote participatory methods, even if you are not the leader or the principal investigator or the key decision maker. There's something you can do as a member of evaluation staff to promote participatory methods. And I'm going to go over some of those things now. So one of my biggest pieces of advice is to start small. So let's look at one of those perceived drawbacks that I mentioned earlier. So let's say you're wanting to add participatory methods to your evaluation, but you're being told that it's too expensive. What I would advise you to say to the person who's telling you that it's too expensive is that it's possible to start small. And one of the ways you can start small is by engaging program implementers or collaborators and having those be the participants. So for example, I've had evaluations where I've worked a lot on mentoring programs for youth, and it was a hard sell to try to get the institution to allow me to engage the youth directly as participant evaluators. But we had program staff, so they weren't part of the evaluation team. They were delivering the mentoring program to youth, but they themselves were very recently youth from very similar situations. That's why we had hired them as mentors. And so I was able to engage them in guiding theory of change development, in creating measurements, and in interpreting results. So it was a way of starting small, of getting folks involved who were adjacent to being participants of the intervention, to start to see what some of the benefits are of having participants engaged in the evaluation. And once your institution or your leadership starts to see those benefits, you can hopefully start to get to put more of your budget towards actually engaging more participants in your evaluation. Let's look at another one of these perceived drawbacks, which is that the evaluation is too quantitative to be participatory. And again, my advice here is to start small. So when someone says this is quantitative, we can't use participatory methods for this, one thing that you can say to them is that you can engage participants in developing your measures. So it doesn't mean engaging participants right away in the most complicated part of a quantitative evaluation. The design of quantitative measures is still something that often requires a high skill level. If you want to do something like testing psychometric properties of your measurements, then it's something that does require statistical skills. But at the end of the day, most of the measurements in social science evaluation are questions that you ask people, made of words, and they respond with words. And the participants from the community can help you figure out how to ask those questions in the way that is most contextually relevant and the way that is going to help answer the larger questions that they have and get you good and valid data. So this is a really solid way to have participants engaged in designing your evaluation, even though it's quantitative, without needing them to have any specific quantitative training. Another starting small way you can engage participants in a quantitative evaluation is having them help with sample selection. So again, sample selection might be something that sounds super quantitative, like you need to go in a statistical software and do a randomization procedure, and maybe you do, but we're almost never doing evaluations with pure randomization. We're often looking at stratification, and we're often looking at different eligibility and ineligibility criteria for our sample. So let's say you're doing an evaluation of a school-based program on sexual and reproductive health. You might want to do a sample selection involving statistical methods where you randomly assign different schools to different treatments, or you randomly select participants, but someone from that community can tell you what should be the ages of the participants in this study. What are the ages that are most relevant for a program like the one you're doing? And that's going to give you that community-based contextualization of this very quantitative procedure that's going to make your sampling method stronger. And then one more way that participants can start to engage in quantitative evaluations is in interpreting quantitative results. So analysis itself in a quantitative evaluation, you probably are going to want folks with statistical training, and that's probably not going to be your research subjects or participants. But quantitative results, we think of them as just numbers, but we have to interpret them and explain what they mean in the context. And that's something that the participants are the folks that are best able to do that. And it's another way that they can get engaged, and another way to start small in having them become leaders of your quantitative evaluation. So that's starting small. My next guidance is that if you're still with me and you're still wanting to get participatory methods into your evaluations, you should become the champion for participatory methods in your organization. So a perceived drawback we've already talked about a bit is that participatory evaluation methods are too expensive. As the champion for participatory methods in your organization, what should your response to this be? One way to frame this is that there are participatory methods that are more expensive, yes, but there are also participatory methods that can save costs by relying on the participants' expertise rather than very expensive outside expertise. So for example, I once worked on an evaluation where we needed to develop constructs for some educational concepts. So this was an entrepreneurship education program, and one of the outcomes that we were looking at was leadership. And so we needed to define the construct of leadership in our context. Now, there are thousands of education research consultants out there who I could have hired for hundreds of dollars an hour to help me define leadership in the Ugandan school child context. But instead, what we did was we had recent graduates of the program participate in focus groups where we workshop definitions of these constructs with them. So we paid them, but we paid them a normal locally appropriate stipend for 1 hour of their time rather than the much higher amount we would have paid an outside consultant. And we got definitions of the constructs that were much more relevant to the kids who were actually learning about leadership in programs like ours and trying to become young leaders. So this is one example of a way that using a participatory method was more effective than using a non-participatory method, and also saved us money, which is the key thing to point out to the person who's telling you that it's too expensive to do things this way. And then something else that you can point out is that there's a cost to not having your evaluation be participatory. There's sort of an opportunity cost with this. So there are studies that have shown that participatory evaluations result in a greater response to the findings. This is one of the advantages that I was talking about earlier. So when you have a participatory evaluation, the community that participated in being evaluated and doing the evaluation is more engaged in responding to the results and making a change. And that's the thing that's going to be important to your donors if you're at a nonprofit evaluation institution. It's something that's going to show more the purpose of your work. It's going to show the impact that you have as a consultant, if you're a consultant, that not only you did this evaluation, but this evaluation led to change in the community. And that's going to result in greater funding in the future. So potentially more expensive now, but with a bigger payoff. So as the champion for participatory methods, this is what I suggest that you point out as some of the reasons to do it and some of the ways to get around the potential costliness. And my final piece of advice is for you to be prepared. So one of the perceived drawbacks that I mentioned is that some folks are nervous about using participatory methods when they don't have expertise. They don't have someone who is a participatory evaluator. So the way that I suggest that you respond to this is to say, I understand participatory methods and I am the person who can use these methods. There are a ton of resources out there that you can use to educate yourself on this. I am going to share a lot of resources at the end of this webinar. My focus today has been more about like, how do you get participatory methods in your evaluation and not how do you actually do participatory methods. So in our upcoming Q&A, we'll talk a little bit more about how to do participatory methods. And I'm also going to share some resources with you so that you can make this statement with confidence. I understand participatory methods. I have researched this. I am confident that I can do this well. This is how to be a champion for participatory methods in your organization. It means putting in the work to be able to lead the participatory methods. Don't just throw the idea out there, but say like, I will be the one to carry this work forward. And you can also say, you know, there are all of these resources, there are all of these peer-reviewed articles that used participatory methods. This isn't something that's just being done by a certain niche community. This is something that's being done by a lot of evaluators. And again, at the end of this webinar, I will provide some of these articles for you that you can show whoever you're trying to convince that this is a legit thing to be doing. Another perceived drawback that you might hear is that we're already doing our participatory dissemination of evaluation results. So what more do we need to do? So my advice to you as the champion for participatory methods is to say that there's more that you can be doing and be prepared with the specifics. So come in and say like, yes, we're doing participatory dissemination, but we could also be engaging participants earlier in the process. And for our evaluation, these are the ideas that I have. So if you've been wanting to make your evaluations more participatory and you haven't had much luck pushing things forward, I would say don't wait for someone to give you the green light to do participatory methods before you start committing to figuring out what those methods are. Figure out specifically what you want to do that's going to be helpful to your organization, the specific methods that are going to make your evaluation stronger, and be prepared and come in and say, this is what we can do, and this is the positive effect that it's going to have for our evaluation and our fundraising or whatever it is that's important to the decision maker. So that's a lot of advice from me, and I'm really excited to bring in Odile, who has some additional experience in actually conducting participatory evaluations, and have a little Q&A. So hi, Odile. Do you want to start by just briefly introducing yourself, and then we'll jump into some questions? And the audience should also know there will be opportunity for audience Q&A with both myself and Odile following this session of me asking questions to Odile.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Odile David. I am an alumni from AU, the graduate certificate program in Project M&E. For the past 12, 14 years, I've been working on the M&E field based at the field level, but now in HQ from Washington, DC. I'm working with an international NGO as a male specialist. So very pleased to join here this webinar.
Thanks, Odile. Can we jump in by hearing from you about a time when you engaged participants in an evaluation?
Yes. Overall, I can say that my experience as a humanitarian and development professional really have exposed me to the importance of engaging program participants in many areas of programming. But in terms of evaluation, particularly in how I've been engaging participants, an example that I can share was the use of the most significant change, MSA, as an evaluation methodology for a measles and rubella campaign in Tanzania. So for those in the call who are not really familiar with the methodology, MSA is a qualitative M&E technique developed by Rick Davis and Jess, which involves collecting stories at the field level where individuals are asked to answer what they think is the most significant change in their own lives. So this is a methodology that puts beneficiary at the heart of data collection and analysis process, asking them about this change, particularly about a specific intervention. Another thing I can add on that is that the qualitative analysis that follows the score collection in MSA is also participatory, as beneficiaries themselves, they prioritize meaningful stories as a way for them to analyze large volume of qualitative data. So MSA requires less resources than traditional analysis methods. And we see how things about budget is something, a drawback that we receive a lot, as mentioned by Jess. So the Q&A is not about MSA, so I will not explain that much. I just wanted to provide a general overview of the process. We have resources available online and also through American University, as we have webinars that have been done in MSA. So going back to this particular MSA evaluation that I've supported in Africa for vaccination, in addition to the regular focus group discussions, key informants interviews, and observation that are usually done in regular evaluation activities, MSA was used to assess a very particular component or aspect of the campaign, which was the social mobilization that were conducted by the volunteers. So to give a little more background of the work, the primary purpose of the evaluation was to better understand how a volunteer-based house-to-house social mobilization visits influences a low socioeconomic and frequently marginalized community experience in regards to measles and rubella vaccination campaigns. So we were interested in documenting the most significant changes in communities' attitudes and also practices towards vaccination as a result of these house-to-house visits that the volunteers were in charge of. So these volunteers, they've helped us identify the changes they've observed and experienced, and as they were engaging in doing themselves these house-to-house visits in these different communities. So how this happened, I was part of a team of consultants as the lead MSc person, and I have supported the training of the staff of the volunteers on the methodology and staff. I have also guided them through the steps of the method, supporting the collection of the stories, and also the facilitation of the workshops where the participants, the volunteers themselves, they analyzed and selected the story that they've considered themselves as the strongest. So overall, this was one of the experiences where I used I did engage participate.
That's so interesting to hear about. Thank you, Odile. Can you tell us about how this experience using most significant change was different from evaluations that you've done that were not so participatory, and whether you felt like the most significant change strengthened the evaluation?
Yes, I think that the ability to be able to provide additional opportunities for the participants in addition to data collection is what makes it mainly different. As I mentioned, the volunteers also, they help analyze the collected stories and then select them. So this was a step further to regular way of where usually we involve participants in the evaluation process. What I can also add is that the whole process gave us the opportunity to experience and also to witness a very high level of pride of the participants in their own achievements, and somehow also in their satisfaction on the results that the campaign was able to accomplish. So I have to say that more than 100% of the targeted vaccination numbers have been achieved from the selected target location. So this was very huge because official data for pre-campaign coverage was very low. And then this is the reason that when they were designing the campaign, they suggested to include the house-to-house visits to address this lag. So with the house-to-house visit, they've been able to go over their target set in terms of, and then the reason why I did mention pride also is because that is not something that I usually do or experience in regular data collection processes. So, you know, you have your evaluation plan and either you do it yourself or you have external consulting to come support. You work with your team member and then they help you coordinate, beneficiaries are available, you come to the field and then you just do your work. You do your focus group, you do your key informant interview, and that's it. So this was totally different to what I've been able to experience. And in that case, it's like the volunteers, the more significant stories was kind of a collection of stories and experiences that was able to tell a bigger stories about behavior change, about the value of personal engagement, which is very important for us in our role as implementers. Sometimes that go even beyond the set of stated objective of a programming, what the program in terms of social cohesion, what the program has been able to, you know, strengthen inside the community. So this is how I can answer to this question in terms of how it was different.
Thanks, Odile. That's a great example where I think you were able to bring in a method where the the group was excited about using the method and you were able to clearly see why it was useful. I'm wondering if you have any examples from your experience where you faced an obstacle in trying to engage participants in evaluation and how you dealt with that.
I do. I do face obstacles in that regards in my work, but I don't think that the key challenge lays into engaging the participant, or I don't think it's happened during the engagement process itself. For us, like trying to, ask the person, do you want to participate? How do you want to involve, or where can you involve? I rather think that it's more on the buy-in and approval of program leadership to accept or approve of a proposed methodology or approach for a given intervention. So if we look at our role as a technical support, we do have to have some kind of approbation. So we propose, we advise, but then this is a team effort, and then the buy-in is important at that level. So reluctance for sure will come in any forms, in any nature. And then, as I mentioned, we as professionals, we do not have always the power to just take the decision and then to have need for us to be able to implement what we recommend as being the best methodology, the best thing to do in the project that we are supporting. So let's take an example. Let's take MSc as an example. Even with the simplicity and relatively light time and staff investment required to make MSc a successful complement to quantitative data collection, it can still be very challenging to convince program staff, program leadership to invest in it. And yes, personally, I've get some no's in the past at some point because program managers, they might have their other priorities. They might have some delay they have to deal with, or they are currently dealing with. And then what they are focusing on is to get the implementation done and being able to report to the donor. They don't have time, or they don't want to take the time to go and explore more participatory methods. So currently, I proposed to include MSc for an exchange program that I'm currently supporting, but I'm still waiting for an approval before I can start with it really. And then this is something that I've been discussing about 2 years ago, say that, okay, when we'll have this project, this is something that we could do. And then still when the times arrive, I still have this go ahead. I still need this permission for me to go ahead and plan accordingly. Will I get the approval? I don't know. Will they come with a no? Maybe. Will I be able to make them change their mind? Maybe, but nothing is sure. So this is kind of a negotiation process. Sometimes you win, sometimes you do not. And then this shouldn't be stopping you to move forward. But I do know that next year I will be implementing MSc for another project in Africa. And the reason why is because I've planned ahead of that. So I think sometimes we will win, sometimes we will not. The important is to still continue, thinking about that and proposing that as our support in our work.
That's great. So maybe to the different sections of advice that I gave, we would add planning ahead as something that can help to get these
Definitely.
Yeah. Great. Well, I hope you get approved for this one.
I do as well.
So you've spoken a lot about most significant change, which I really appreciated. It's also a method that I've used to engage participants a little bit more. And I think that it's something that is really flexible. And as you mentioned, it can be really affordable. Are there any other participatory methods that you have experience using that you could tell us about?
Photo voice is another type of participatory tool that I've also used in the past. So briefly, what is photo voice? It is a participatory tool that is used to monitor community-led changes with the active involvement of beneficiaries as well. Photo voice empowers individuals and communities and has the potential for skill building in photojournalism. When used appropriately, the method engages the community and also provides opportunities for individuals within the community to voice their feelings and observations through photography. Photo voice has been used extensively with vulnerable populations such as youth, stigmatized group, and any other similar group. So in terms of goals related to photo voice, I can say that photo voice can enable people to record and reflect their personal and community strengths and concerns. Photo voice can help promote critical dialogue and knowledge about personal and community issues through group discussions of photographs, and it also can be used to reach policymakers. So what have been my specific role or my experience in terms of photo voice? I will be sharing through with you today. In the Caribbean, in Haiti, I have used a photo voice for a large integrated programming with various sectors like community health, livelihood, and infrastructure. The change with the single targeted program locations from the beneficiary point of view or eyes. So this was done with the youth living in these communities. So we've trained them, we give them their cameras, they go out to collect the pictures, and we provide some coaching session to improve the quality of the pictures. And also we also had the opportunity to hold various workshops with them where they can share the stories behind their pictures, you know, and then share about the experience from their day-to-day life and describe this experience in the light of the impact of the program, of the impact of the activities that were implemented as part of this intervention. So this is the way I've supported in Haiti, in the Caribbean. And then I can also share an experience for West Africa. So this is not yet implemented. We are preparing for it. And then over there, we will use photo voice to, so it will use by, in West Africa, we will use it to enable the female youth to document and discuss how women and girls access services and then how they participate in addressing community challenges through photo exhibition. So this is not yet implemented. We are on the planning phase, but because we plan ahead, we know that is going to happen. So
yeah, that's really exciting that you have a few different participatory methods coming up in your work. So I'm definitely seeing the value of planning ahead. And I appreciate you telling us about photo voice. It's not something I've had the opportunity to work on, but it seems like a great way to engage folks in deciding what data they want to share by choosing what to photograph and how to photograph it. So I have one more question for you, Odile, and then we'll turn it over to questions from the audience, which is just sort of generally, what advice do you have for evaluators who are seeking to incorporate more participatory methods into their work?
So my number one will be intentional, think ahead. This will be definitely my first advice for anyone who will seek to have the opportunity to include more participatory methods or conducting participatory evaluation as part of their role or their functions. So I am an M&E professional and I will take my role as an example. So I do have in my work the opportunity to contribute at the proposal design stage for intervention. This is an interesting place to be if you are thinking about way you can propose, some participatory method. So the issue is buy-in, when you take it from that phase, can be resolved way before the activity even started or even awarded. So this is kind of set with the proposal team that this is the way you want the intervention will go, and then this is what is being proposed in terms of how to make it more participatory. So I would say that as a first recommendation or opportunity, and then the MEL plan development is another one, because sometimes as a MEL professional, you didn't have the opportunity to contribute to the proposal for the intervention, but then you're asked to develop a MEL plan, for that program. So this is another opportunity for you to propose some more participatory methods. Okay, so at that stage, still, you can still have the John Backs people saying that, they don't have the budget, but since usually it's at the beginning, there is more flexibility. If you are able to really do a nice job in terms of advocating on the importance, how it will be beneficial for the program, then they might, do some adjustment, because in your MEL plan, you will have to develop a budget, a resource for the MEL activity that we'll be conducting. So this is an additional opportunity, I think, that people can use to encourage to include some of these participatory methods in their work. Another thing I can say that depending on the organization, evaluation are most likely done externally. So the staff are not involved in doing themselves the evaluation, and then it's kind of a limit in terms of what the staff can be, how deep the staff can be involved. But then in my experience working with organizations, so I might not be conducting the evaluation, but I'm working as an evaluation manager. That means I'm managing the consultants, and then I am contributing or be responsible to develop the terms of reference. So this is also an opportunity when developing the term of reference. So you can put some requirements in terms of participatory opportunities for this specific evaluation. So I think this is third advice, a third opportunity, if I can put it that way. But overall, I would say that my main advice would be definitely to start small. To start small, and then tonight try proposing a very full step of participatory method, or a very full set of a participatory evaluation when your management is not yet on board. Don't prepare a methodology for an evaluation where you want to participate in all of the steps with an organization, with a leadership that haven't used that at all. So the chances that you receive a no, it's very much higher. So, and then if you cannot go to a full set of, to make a regular evaluation more participatory, you can explore participatory methods in your responsibility, in your MEL work, if you are a MEL person. So new participatory methods can be definitely be explored. And then when you cannot really go to a full participatory evaluation or participatory research. So MSA and photo voice, there are some participatory methods I've used, so you can explore them as well to see if they are of interest, if they can benefit to your organization, to your programming. They are not very expensive, and then if you have staff available to support, that will be very, very low cost for your project team. So I really think the same as Jess. The key is to try starting somewhere, and even the simple fact of putting this to discussion, to reflection, is really worth trying. So yeah.
Thanks, Odile. That's great. I'm glad you agree with me, but I think you've also added a lot more from your own experience, thoughts on being intentional and where you can plan ahead, whether you're engaged in a design from the beginning or later on, the ways that you can engage participatory methods. That's really great. So I just want to mention, I said earlier that I would share some resources, and I don't want to leave you all hanging. So I do have those here. I just want to show you that I've got a list of resources that you can use to try to learn how to use some of these participatory tools, some of the things that Odile has mentioned, and some other sort of background on how participatory methods work. And then for those who want to get a little bit more into the academic literature with participatory methods, or if you feel like you need this level of evidence that participatory methods are legit, I've got a bunch of articles here, including some meta-analyses showing the use of participatory methods at a very high level of rigor. So we'll share out these 2 slides of resources after the webinar. And with that, I'll turn it over to our moderators if there are any questions for Odile or myself from the audience.
Well, I'm not sure about Zoom, but we do have a question coming from Facebook. So let me go ahead and start with that one. If other people have questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A section or the chat, and we will get to those next. So this question comes from Dennis Hood, and he said that we recently completed a qualitative project using the snowball method for sample selection. We asked interviewees who else we should speak with, basically. Would this count as a form of participatory approach to sample selection?
Odile, I feel like you're shaking your head. Do you want to try to respond to this?
I will say something, but then feel free to add. So I just wanted to share that once in one of the rounds of MSA that I've done, I did use the snowball as a technique. So to put it briefly, sometimes when you do MSA, you might decide as a team to define your domains of change. That means that you already identified a specific aspect or area of the programming that you will be collecting stories of change from. So that time we haven't done so, and then we've used the snowball, and then we just start with one community like that, residents. We try to collect a story, and then we ask, who do you think in the community might have a very interesting stories to change based on what the project was doing in the community. So I just wanted to share this experience about snowball. So, but Jess, feel free to add up in terms of how do you feel about it in terms of participatory sampling method.
Yeah, I think it depends on how you utilize it. I think it's possible to use snowball sampling in a way that's not really participatory, even though you do have participants telling you who to interview. If you already have a research question and a sampling criteria that wasn't determined in a participatory way, and you're just simply trying to locate more people, like where can we find other people like you, I don't think that's highly participatory. It's a good method often to use, but I don't think it's necessarily repositioning the people that you're asking in the power structure of the evaluation. But what Odile just mentioned, saying who would have a really interesting story about this, that's different from just like, who else fits your demographic profile that we should ask. And I think that that's a way that you can use snowball sampling as a participatory method, where you're having your participants decide who are the important people in their community who need to be part of the sample.
Yeah, great. There's someone in the Zoom chat that's saying if anyone has experience they could share of measuring community-led change, that would be helpful to hear. Are there any other experiences that either of you would be able to share?
So I have not worked on measuring a community-led program that comes to mind. I think this is an interesting question when we think about participatory evaluation and participatory programming. When I think of community-led change, I think of programming that's participatory, and it can still be evaluated in a non-participatory way, and vice versa. You can have participatory evaluation of an intervention that was totally not community or participant led. So in an ideal world, we would have participant leadership everywhere, from creating the evaluations to evaluating them. But unfortunately, that's not really where my experience lies. If anyone wants to respond to that question in the chat who has some experience from that, that'd be great. Or Odile, I don't know if you have experience in that area.
No, not particularly that I can share.
Another question that I have for both of you is you spoke about one way that including participants in the process and starting small could be including them in the sampling technique. And so I guess I'm wondering if you've come across issues with participants having differing opinions about inclusion and exclusion of others, and how you would handle that without kind of invoking a power dynamic where you're making that decision for them.
That's such a great question, Gabby. And I think it draws our attention to remembering that participant engagement shouldn't be tokenism, and we shouldn't be engaging participants in a way that might reinforce existing power structures in a negative way, or that might elevate the opinion of one individual participant or one subgroup of participants without attention to the power dynamics in that community. So there are different ways that you can do this. A common way of engaging participants across various methodologies is having them do focus groups, which gives people the opportunity to talk to each other. So for example, if you were going to try to define a sample eligibility criteria, you could convene a focus group where participants directly discuss with each other areas where they agree and disagree. That can be empowering. That can also reinforce existing power dynamics depending on what happens in that room. So it's something that you need to be intentional about. You could also go and sort of an opposite direction and have like an anonymous survey of participants, and just go with, you know, if everybody says that this sample should include mostly women, then if everybody says that, then that's what you do, and take out the sort of personal background of the folks participating in the survey. So there's a few different ways to do it, but I think to not answer your question, what I want to say is that you've got to pay attention to how you're doing that, and who you're defining as a participant, and how that might impact the community that you're working with.
And adding to your example on focus group discussion, these are things that if you are in a situation where you will be organizing or conducting yourself focus groups, to be aware of, because based on the context where we'll be doing this focus group discussion, the power dynamics can be like you can feel it and see it in the way that the participants are responding. You might see only that you have the males that are responding, and then sometimes when the females start talking, the male will cut the female off, or they just, you know, they just don't want to talk. So this is where the skills of the facilitator of this focus group will have to come into play, into how you will address and try to ask, for example, specific questions to specific people, instead of having only one person or a male figure just, you know, leading the discussion overall, and then not giving opportunities to other participants to share also their thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for those thoughts. It was something that was kind of rocketing around in my head as I was listening to you both talk, and knowing that, you know, when you're in a community, not everybody agrees. And so getting the community together is wonderful. And I was just wondering how you approach that. So that was really helpful. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we go ahead and close up here? I don't see any other questions coming through the chat unless you see something, Miguel, that I'm overlooking, but looks like it's pretty clear right now.
So I don't see any questions on the Zoom side, but I do have a question. How does participant-led evaluation differ from culturally relevant evaluation? Or is it, are these, yeah, just as from your perspective?
Yeah, I think you can have an evaluation that's culturally relevant without it necessarily being participant-led. It sort of depends on the level at which your evaluation is happening. You can have evaluators who understand the general cultural context, but aren't part of like the subgroup or community that's the subject of the evaluation. So I think cultural relevance of an evaluation is sort of the minimum that we should all be aiming for as evaluators. And then participant leadership, that's actually in the world of participant evaluation, that would be like the official term for the highest level of participant engagement and evaluation. So an evaluation is participant-led if the participants are getting paid to do the work, which is another issue we should all be aware of when we talk about these questions of equity, and where they're the ones designing the evaluation, deciding what questions need to be asked, and figuring out how to ask those questions and interpreting the data and all of that. That's a participant-led evaluation. And I think it goes way beyond the sort of minimum you need for a culturally relevant evaluation. I want to just flag because I was talking over the moment when Odile had to drop off. So she has had to leave for another meeting, and I really appreciated having her here and her insights.
Yeah, and thank you too, Jess. Jess and Odile have shared some great information about participatory strategies from their own experience, from using participation in the community with targeted tools, all the way up to creating participation in the evaluation itself. So we heard about the benefits of engaging participants, as well as the complexities of involving project collaborators in large or highly structured institutions. And while involving participants has ethical and practical benefits, such as increased validity, inclusivity, and lower costs, potentially, these strategies are still emerging and might not be embraced by everyone immediately. So in those situations, some initial objections might be related to perceived lack of expertise on the evaluation team or concern about the approach not being rigorous enough, the potential of additional expenses, or the concern about where that approach might fit into a traditional evaluation design. So Jess offered some really specific strategies to effectively respond to these concerns, namely starting small, focusing on a low skill part of the process, such as sample selection or data collection strategy to work in program participants. She emphasized being prepared with ideas and strategies and advocating for participatory methods and to approach those conversations, highlighting the positive possibilities rather than focusing on those objections. So ultimately, Jess said, become your own champion, right? And offer yourself to your organization as the expert that they need. So Odile shared some experiences as well from the field on how she engaged in using most significant change in Tanzania and using this to involve participants in not just the focus groups and observations that are typical, but also asking volunteers, participants to help analyze stories that were collected and select the most meaningful stories from their perspective. The ability to provide additional opportunities for participants to engage in the evaluation created a level of additional pride and excitement about what the project was accomplishing. This went above even the goal of the evaluation, increasing buy-in and support for the initiative. She also talked about the same obstacles Jess mentioned, but her advice was to make sure you leave time for these objections to be explored and moved past. So she shared about some participatory tools, a method called photo voice, which puts the power of data inclusion in the hands of the participants. And also just shared that her top advice is to be intentional and think ahead when you're integrating participatory tools into evaluation. So I want to say a big thank you to Jess and Odile for speaking today. Thank you to Miguel, my co-moderator, and to Dr. Peters for getting us all here today. So thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.